Bryan Kohberger is responsible for 4 counts of murder, a massive investigation, and shock within the community. With new details pouring in weekly, could he possibly be innocent? Or one of the world's greatest masterminds? How did this intelligent and soft-spoken man be accused of such a heinous crime? And why are prosecutors delaying the trial? This is Idaho 4's Last Night on Earth. 2:44 a.m. Bryan Kohberger leaves his apartment and is seen on Washington state surveillance cameras heading towards Highway 270, which connects Pullman to Moscow. Before he enters the highway, he disconnects his phone from the network, attempting to conceal his location. At this point in time, Bryan would be feeling an intense adrenaline rush and a sickened excitement as he is ready to accomplish the goal he has rigorously planned. The white Hyundai Elantra is not seen again until 3:26 a.m. when surveillance cameras in Moscow spot the vehicle going westbound on Indian Hills Drive and appears to not have a front license plate. Between 3:29 a.m. and 4 a.m., the vehicle is seen passing the home on Kings Road 4 times in what has been described as planning to enter the home at the perfect moment. At 4:04 a.m., all surveillance cameras lose sight of the vehicle as he enters a small parking lot behind the home. Bryan then enters through an unlocked sliding door on the back side of the home. Knowing every inch of the layout, he moves swiftly upstairs and enters the target room of Madison Mogen. To his surprise, he finds Kaylee Goncalves in the bed with her and goes on a stabbing rampage as other occupants in the house are completely unaware of the situation. The 2 defenseless girls are in true horror as their lives flash before their eyes. The struggle inside the small room was intense, and Kaylee even tries to make an escape attempt, but is trapped between the back wall and the body of her best friend Madison. For their final 2 minutes on Earth, these young girls experience a horrendous nightmare with unimaginable pain and suffering. During this time, a surviving roommate, Dylan Mortensen, who lived below Madison, wakes to sounds of cries and whimpers along with a barking dog. Leaving Madison Morgan's room, Bryan walks down the stairs to find Ethan Chapin in front of his door trembling as he begins to understand the gravity of the situation. As he turns to retreat to the bedroom, he is attacked by Bryan and brutally killed. Xana Kernodle, who has been awake this entire ordeal, would have witnessed this as she laid on her bed, fearing for her own life. Without hesitation, Bryan Kohberger wreaks havoc inside this small bedroom. Simultaneously across the hall, Dylan Mortensen opens her bedroom door and hears crying from the room, loud thuds, and an unknown male say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She closes the door at this point and begins to think she could be in danger. Minutes later, she opens the door again, and to her surprise, she sees a man with bushy eyebrows wearing black clothing and a mask. She is completely frozen in shock as Bryan looks into her eyes and exits the same sliding door he entered through. Bryan retreats up the path back towards his car, where he begins stripping all of his clothes and putting them into large plastic bags in order to not contaminate his vehicle. At 4:20 a.m., the white Hyundai is seen leaving the area on surveillance cameras at a high rate of speed. Driving away from the crime scene, Bryan would feel elated and physically exhausted as he made a run for the highway. By 4:48 a.m., his cell phone mysteriously connects back to the network, and at 5:30 a.m., Bryan Kohberger arrives back to his apartment, escaping successfully from a quadruple murder. Immediately following her hair-raising encounter with the killer, Dylan Mortensen locked herself in her room for almost 7 hours. This is something police have been puzzled with since the beginning of this case. But experts have one theory that can describe her state the night of the murders. Frozen shock phase could fall under a number of acute trauma responses, such as disassociation and tonic immobility, which are commonly elicited in stressful scenarios. People who have experienced it say they felt as if they weren't part of their bodies. When someone has been through severe trauma, they may dissociate in and out for hours at a time. At 11:58 a.m., a call is finally made to the police, and they are horrified when they enter the home. They find all 4 students deceased with multiple stab wounds, and some of which have defensive wounds. Police immediately alert the public about the deaths in a news release, and while they say no one is in custody, they do not believe there is an ongoing community risk based on information gathered during the preliminary investigation. After accomplishing a high-risk murder, criminals will feel an overwhelming adrenaline rush, a godlike power, and sadistic relief. Bryan Kohberger, being so infatuated and obsessed with what he had done, returns the next morning back to Moscow at 9:30 a.m. To his disappointment, there are no police, ambulances, news crews, or detectives in the area when he arrives. In the following weeks, students at Washington State University notice major differences in Bryan's behavior. Known to be quiet and keep to himself, Kohberger was noticeably more social and approachable following the murders. He was also known to be a difficult grader in his role as a teacher's assistant in the months leading up to the murders, but handed out hundreds and left very minimal feedback afterwards. A month after the murders, Bryan Kohberger and his dad set off on a cross-country odyssey in the vehicle of interest, headed home to Pennsylvania from Washington State University. Suspiciously, he avoided the most direct route, which was along Interstate 90 and 94 and is a 38-hour drive. He instead goes south near I-70, then cuts east on a route that takes them past Indianapolis along the way, adding at least 6 hours to the drive. On their way home, the Kohbergers pass through Hancock County, just east of Indianapolis, but a local deputy and a state trooper stopped the duo, resulting in a pair of body cam videos that eventually revealed Kohberger's voice to the public. Susan Constantine, a behavioral analyst who specializes in body language and detecting deception, said his demeanor was one of suspicion and commented on the intensity of his stare and clenching of the driver's wheel. The FBI assigned 60 personnel and 2 behavioral analysts to help the small Moscow Police Department with the investigation immediately after the murders. For 3 days, local officials insist there was no ongoing threat to the community and that the murders were both isolated and targeted. Students, locals, and the victims' families were less convinced and leave the town prior to the end of the college term. 12 days later, on November 25th, police in Moscow asked regional law enforcement to look for a white Elantra, and WSU police officers run a query for any on campus. One came back as having a Pennsylvania license plate and being registered to Kohberger. Within half an hour, another campus officer located the vehicle parked at Kohberger's apartment complex, and it came back as having Washington State tags. 5 days after the killings, Kohberger had switched the registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. This was when detectives believed they were breaking the case. Bryan Kohberger's license listed him at 6'4", 185 pounds with bushy eyebrows, which is almost identical to Dylan Mortenson's description of the man in the mask she saw on Kings Road. With the police on his tail, they monitored Bryan Kohberger's actions as he drives across the country to Pennsylvania. As police kept information close to their chest in this case, multiple rumors began to spread like wildfire in Moscow, and with no suspect in sight, students began to speculate who might be responsible for the killings. Jeremy Reagan was a close neighbor to the house on Kings Road and quickly becomes the target for online crime sleuths. In multiple interviews with the swarming media, he claims he went to bed early the night of the murders, but his demeanor is considered strange to viewers. Jeremy, in the following days, is harassed so much on social media that he eventually shows up unannounced to the Moscow police to get DNA tested and is ruled out of the crime. With that lead drying up, and still no information from Moscow police, the community turns their sights on Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, Jack Decor, who she had called at least 7 times, 1 hour before the brutal murders. These claims were brought to rest by Kaylee's family, telling the media the police are wasting their time looking into Jack, and that he's just as distraught as we are. With neighbors, boyfriends, and close friends all cleared of the murders, The community becomes desperate within Moscow. Behind the scenes, police are working vigorously, testing DNA within the house, tracking Bryan Kohberger, and taking heat from the media so as not to alert him. Multiple outlets, such as Business Insider and Newsweek, begin to report that the case is going cold, and parents of the slain students criticize the department for keeping them in the dark about the investigation. The most important piece of evidence found at the crime scene is a K-bar knife sheath found partially under Madison's body. This USMC fighting knife is described as a legendary blade that was first designed to serve U.S. troops during World War II, and is one of the most famous fixed-blade knives in the world today. As the knife sheath is being tested for DNA, investigators immediately begin digging into Kohberger's mysterious Reddit posting, where he attempted to query criminals on what it felt like to commit crimes, what steps they took to avoid capture, and how they mentally prepared for such an act. Kohberger also wrote a series of posts on a website called Tapatalk in a forum for people who suffer from visual snow syndrome, an uncommon neurological condition that affects the way visual information is processed by the brain and eyes. People with the syndrome see many flickering dots like snow or static. One post written by him in July of 2011 says he has been suffering from horrible depersonalization and how he feels demons in his head are mocking him. Another post from that year talks about having depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, as well as delusions of grandeur, crazy thoughts, and no emotion. It was also revealed that Bryan Kohberger's own family believed he was up to something and had suspicions about his involvement in a break-in at one of his female students' apartments. Bryan offered to help install a security camera in the home for her safety, but allegedly hacked the cameras to spy on the woman. This could be what's known as a step in progression, where a criminal will practice breaking into an unoccupied home before they carry out the real crime. December 16th, 2:26 p.m. Bryan Kohberger arrives at his parents' house in Pennsylvania after a long drive across the country, and immediately his family notices his bizarre behavior. Being completely paranoid, Bryan constantly wears latex gloves inside and outside the house and avoids touching anything whatsoever. So convinced he was involved, his two older sisters search his white Hyundai Elantra thoroughly to find any clues that he could be involved in the murders. Simultaneously, investigators are watching Bryan's parents' house 24/7 and spotted him cleaning the Elantra with bleach just one day prior. The FBI had followed him the entire way, noting his every move, and began secretly stealing his trash after witnessing him dumping it in a neighbor's bin at 4 a.m., the exact same time as the murders. After sending all of the items to the Idaho State Lab, they immediately confirmed a statistical match with DNA they found on the knife sheath. They started with a genetic material located on the knife and tried uploading it to the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, a database of DNA from people convicted of crimes, people who've been arrested, and DNA from other crime scenes, but they didn't get a hit. Next, investigators used a process called investigative genetic genealogy. They uploaded a profile of the DNA sample to a public database, where people can upload their own DNA profiles generated by services like Ancestry.com and 23andMe. This DNA was at least 5.37 octillion times more likely to belong to Kohberger than an unrelated individual randomly selected from the general population. But what's more surprising is that 99.9% of the male population would be excluded from this positive result. After the investigative genetic genealogy pointed investigators toward Kohberger, they had all they needed to get a search warrant for Bryan Kohberger's parents' house. 1:10 a.m., December 30th. The mood is tense as investigators, SWAT teams, and local police assemble in a small community in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. They all are aware that this could be the person who terrorized an entire university 2,500 miles away just 1 month prior. They are given the word and immediately gain access to the home by breaking windows and busting down the front and back door together. To their surprise, they find Bryan in the kitchen, alone, wearing latex gloves and separating his personal trash into Ziploc baggies. A Glock 22, multiple knives, black face masks, and gloves were among the dozens of chilling items that were seized. Medical records and Kohberger's AT&T phone bill were also taken from the home. Police searched Kohberger's 2015 white Hyundai Elantra and emptied its contents, including gloves, a shovel, goggles, floor mats, boots, and reflective vests. Authorities even stripped the sedan of its gas, brake pedal, seat cushions, and headrests. During a search of Kohberger's Washington State apartment, just a short drive from the scene of the murders, local investigators seized a mattress cover, possibly stained with blood, human hair strands, and a single glove. Documents show a reddish-brown stain on an uncased pillow as well as a brown irregular drip found on the mattress cover. Both of these came back as preliminarily positive for blood. Another dark red spot on the kitchen counter near the sink was unable to be tested at the scene, but was collected for further analysis. After testing, the vast majority were negative for any possibility of being blood. The police described the apartment as sparsely furnished and fairly empty of belongings, including no shower curtain in the bathroom, and the trash cans appeared empty. Authorities also went to Kohberger's office at the WSU campus, where he had just completed his first semester as a PhD student in the school's criminal justice program. His desk was completely emptied out, and police found nothing whatsoever. Prosecutors looking to convict Bryan Kohberger of the quadruple murder may consider the evidence against him a gift. Kohberger's defense team, however, has found several credible avenues to plant reasonable doubt in the minds of a jury, which may lead to a not guilty verdict. The defense also may be building his alibi around a theory that his DNA was planted on the knife sheath found near one of the victims to build a rigged case against him. Recent news alleges that there is DNA from at least 3 other men as well at the crime scene. The murder weapon is helpful to a prosecution because it is extremely powerful evidence against the suspect, but the weapon in this case has never been found. They believe that there are only 2 ways the knife will be found at this point, either by sheer luck of someone walking and hunting, or it's possible he may give up its location to avoid the death penalty. Prosecutors also recently disclosed in court documents that a police officer involved in the quadruple murder case is the subject of an internal affairs probe, and any alleged impropriety on the part of the investigators could threaten the trial. Bryan Kohberger's alibi in this case claims he was driving alone when the murders took place, something he did very often, but he won't give details on the specifics until later in the case. A judge has ruled that cameras operated by the media or public within the courtroom will be banned, something that Kohberger's attorney pleaded with and won. This plays very well for the defense by slowing down the sensationalization of the case that has drawn national attention. If it's revealed that Kohberger attended a party previously at the house on Kings Road, this entire case would be turned upside down, and the defense could ask the judge to throw out the DNA in court. With many speculations and theories brewing about the case, and a delayed trial to summer, the true story about what happened that dreadful night could be worse than any of us have ever imagined. Please subscribe and like this video for constant updates on this case and others in the near future.